The attorney set the sealed envelope on the table before he started reading, not at the end, at the beginning. When he laid out the will documents, the envelope went in last, bottom of the stack, edges soft with age. It had been there the whole time. Nobody asked why an envelope that yellowed with age was sitting in a folder with a will dated this past March. It had been in his office for years. You could see it in the paper. Nobody asked. I noticed. I said nothing. My name is Maris Whitmore. I'm 28 years old. Last Tuesday, I sat in a conference room in Newark, Ohio, and watched 8 members of my family receive a combined total of several $1,000,000 from my grandfather Harold's estate. When they reached my name in the will, the attorney slid that envelope across the table. Inside, a phone number. 4 words. My family laughed for 90 seconds. I counted and then went back to their afternoon. The attorney did not laugh. He closed his folder and watched me the way you watch someone who is about to do something important, and I don't know it yet. 3 things happened in the following 24 hours that nobody in that room predicted. Because nobody in that room had actually finished reading. Here's what the envelope said. Here's what happened when I called the number. And here's what the document had always said, the part nobody bothered to turn to. The truth wasn't hidden. It was written down. Nobody read it. Let me tell you something about Harold Whitmore before I tell you about the will. Harold built Whitmore Properties from a single duplex renovation in 1,981 inches apart of central Ohio, where nobody was renovating anything. He worked with his hands for 11 years before he could afford a second employee. By the time I was old enough to understand what he did, the company had 40 employees, 6 active developments, and a name on county commissioner plaques in 3 counties. What I knew before all that, he kept sawdust in his shirt pockets. Whatever wood, he was working in the workshop that week, a curl of walnut, a pinch of maple dust, in the breast pocket above his heart. He said it kept him connected to the actual work while he was in meetings about the work. He taught me to sand a table edge when I was 9. Every Sunday at the workshop, in Granville for years, I drove 40 minutes to be in that room. Not because everyone arranged it, because I wanted to be there. I am, by the family's accounting, the failure. I dropped out of college at 19 to help Harold after a stroke. 4 months of daily physical therapy, medication, management. The slow walks around the property he hated and I made him do anyway. His doctor called the recovery remarkable. I never went back to finish the semester. The scholarship lapsed. My mother told her friends I just wasn't college material. I manage a furniture store called Birch and Stone on Route 9 inches Holden. I drive a Honda Civic with 90,000 miles on it. I wear a 2-year-old blazer to formal occasions because I own 1 blazer. I am, in the Whitmore family's internal accounting, the acceptable loss the grandchild Harold loved in the gentle, uncomplicated way you love someone you don't expect much from. That is what they believed. Here is what I believed. I believed Harold had never, in my memory, said anything he didn't mean. Not at the workshop, not at the table, not the night of my grandfather's last Thanksgiving when everyone went around the table reporting wins, and he tapped his glass once to quiet the room and said, "She manages that entire store. Inventory, staff, accounts. That's called responsibility." My mother waved her hand. "Dad, don't baby her." The table moved on, but I remembered the workshop later that night. Harold on his stool, running his thumb along a piece of walnut, looking up at me after the others had gone. "Don't ever believe a diploma tells people who you are." His voice was quiet, the voice he used when he thought about something carefully. "I've taken care of things, Maris." I didn't ask what he meant. I should have asked. I understand now why I didn't, because asking would have changed something, and I wasn't ready for it to change. But I filed those words the way I filed things that mattered, without framing them yet, without knowing what they were for. The phrase, the workshop, the way he looked at me. The truth wasn't hidden. It was written down. Nobody had read the last page yet. The stroke. Age 19. Harold had a minor stroke on a February morning, left side weakness. Slurred speech. The body's way of announcing that a person who has driven hard for 50 years has some accounting to do. The doctor said he needed daily physical therapy, someone to manage medication, supervision during recovery. My mother said, "He has a nurse." Sterling, the self-appointed COO, said, "I'm swamped at the office." Cecily was in her 2nd year at Case Western and did not come home for 3 weeks. I dropped my semester and drove to Granville every morning at 7. I helped with grip strength exercises, balance drills, the slow walks around the property he hated and which I enforced anyway because the doctor said to. I sorted his medications into the weekly organizer. I read him the newspaper when his eyes were too tired to track the page. I stayed until 8, drove back to Holden, slept, came back at 7. 4 months later, Harold was at full capacity. His doctor called the recovery remarkable. I never went back to Ohio State. 3 weeks into Harold's recovery, he asked me to bring something from his desk. I went to study. The desk was locked, he kept it locked. But the third drawer was not fully closed, and inside I saw the edge of a folder with a rubber band around it and a label in Harold's block letters, Alcott Private. I closed the drawer. I didn't ask about it. I filed it. The night before the will reading, I was in Harold's kitchen, making coffee when I found a folder on the counter. Not the estate folder, something smaller. Inside, a slip of paper with 2 names, Roger Harmon and Warren Alcott. 2 different addresses, 2 different phone numbers. Roger Harmon, the estate. Attorney, they will read tomorrow. Warren Alcott, no title listed, just an address, in Columbus. I had never heard of Warren Alcott. I put the folder back. I did not sleep well. In the morning, I drove to Newark in the 2-year-old Blazer. The Thanksgiving table, 4 months before Harold died. The Whitmore Thanksgiving runs on a format my mother established in Harold's own house without Harold's permission, and which Harold tolerated because it was easier than objecting. 14 people, round robin of wins. My mother at the other head of the table from Harold. This Thanksgiving, Cecily's PropLink startup had closed a second funding round, MBA from Case Western, building real technology. The table applauded. Brand, her husband, squeezed her shoulder. Sterling described a development deal in Licking County for 4 minutes and used the phrase strategic vision twice. Then the round robin reached me, and Thea, my mother, used the nickname I'd asked her not to use. She paused. The comedian's pause, the one that sets up the punchline. Thea is still at that little furniture place. A tilt of the head, selling chairs. The laugh was not loud. The polite kind is always worse. I looked at my plate. Green beans, sliced turkey. The tablecloth was linen Harold had ordered from Vermont 20 years ago. From the far end of the table, Harold tapped his glass once. The room quieted. He had not raised his voice. He never needed to. She manages that store, he said. Inventory, staff, accounts. That's called responsibility. My mother waved it off. Dad, don't baby her. Sterling. If she wants to be taken seriously, she should go back to school. Harold said nothing else. But later, after dessert, after Sterling's third scotch, after Cecily left early, I found Harold in the workshop, sitting on his stool, thumb running along a piece of walnut. He looked up at me. I held my gaze for a long time. Don't ever believe a diploma tells people who you are. His voice is quiet, precise. I've taken care of things, Maris. I didn't ask what he meant. He knew you couldn't handle it, Diane said to me that night in the kitchen. When it was just the 2 of us. She said it with what she considered kindness. Your grandfather loves you, but he knows the difference between love and capacity. That's not a criticism. She meant it as fact. It landed like a sentence. Incident 3. The will folder. Morning before the reading. At the house the morning before the reading, while the family was performing the particular grief of people calculating their inheritance, I went to Harold's study. The desk was open now. The family had gone through it the day before. The third drawer was empty. The Alcott private folder was gone. Someone had taken it, or Harold had prepared for it to be taken. I ran through the possibilities while standing in the study. Then I went back to the kitchen. The folder on the counter, the one with the 2 names and 2 addresses, was still there, exactly where I'd left it. No one had noticed it because it looked like a grocery list, just paper with writing. I took a photograph of it on my phone before the others came downstairs. Warren Alcott, Columbus address, no title, no context. I filed it. The conference room at Harmon and Pace smelled like old leather and printer ink, and the specific institutional neutrality of a room that has witnessed a great many families become something other than what they believed they were. 8 chairs around an oval table. Portraits of former partners along one wall, men in suits managing expressions of practiced authority. The overhead light was fluorescent, not atmospheric, just functional. Someone had put a water pitcher in the center of the table. Nobody had touched it. I arrived early. I do this. I like to see a room before it fills. Roger Harmon stood near the window, the estate folder under his arm. Gray suit, reading glasses on a chain. Expression carefully, professionally blank the blankness of a man who has done this many times and has learned that any expression he shows becomes part of the story the family tells afterward. He placed the folder on the table. I watched him do it. The will, a sheaf of pages, rubber banded. A separate stapled set of supporting documents. And the envelope yellowed, older than the other documents, placed last. My name on the front. Harold's handwriting. The ink was faded. Not the careful block letters of a March document. This had been written years ago and stored. I noted this. I said nothing. The others arrived. Cecily in the tailored black dress, brand with the leather, briefcase he opened immediately. Sterling with sunglasses on, despite the overcast sky. My mother in an Uber. She'd sold her car 6 months ago. I'd seen the list online. I hadn't mentioned it, because people carrying debt don't advertise it, and I had learned not to hand people more ammunition than they already had. In the lobby, Cecily and Sterling had been calculating. 4 million in accounts, at least, plus properties, plus the company who runs it now. They hadn't noticed me until I sat across from them. Cecily. Oh, you came? A pause, the small smile. That's sweet. I'm sure Grandpa left you something. A card, maybe. I folded my hands in my lap. The blazer tag scratched the back of my neck. I did not answer. Roger Harmon opened the conference room door. The Whitmore family. We're ready. They stood. Cecily smoothed her dress. Sterling buttoned his jacket. Diane lifted her chin. I walked in last. I sat at the end of the table. Not the far end, 2 seats from the attorney. On his left side, where I could see the folder clearly. The will was rubber banded. He removed the rubber band and set it aside. Placed his reading glasses on. Open to page 1. Pursuant to the last will and testament of Harold James Whitmore, dated March of this year, he began to read. I watched his hands. The way he turned pages, not scanning, not performing. Each page turned deliberately at the moment he reached the final line. The pace of a man who has read this document before and is now delivering it as written, without editorializing, without inflection. Page 5. The envelope was still at the bottom of the stack. On page 7, Harmon paused. Not a procedural pause. 3 seconds, which is not procedural. He looked at the document, then he looked at me, specifically to me. Then he turned back to the document and continued reading. I did not look away. In my jacket pocket was a folded photograph of the paper with 2 names on it. Warren Elcott, Columbus. I thought, the document is not done. I thought, he was telling me something. I thought, wait. Roger Harmon read the will in the order it was written, which is the only correct way to read a will. Sterling received the Lake Erie vacation house and $800,000 in cash. His hand found the table, tapped once, the gesture of a man who expected more and has decided to accept what came. He nodded slightly, already recalculating. My mother received the Columbus apartment and $600,000. She closed her eyes for half a second. I recognized the expression. Not grief. Relief. Whatever she had been carrying, and she had been carrying something. The Uber. The sold car. The debt she hadn't announced. It was slightly lighter now. Cecily and Brand received $500,000 plus Harold's investment portfolio. Cecily wrote something in her phone immediately. The thumbs of someone updating a financial model. Brand opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. They had come with their own paperwork, which told you everything about what kind of day they had planned. Several cousins received education trusts, $200,000 each. Standard. Harmon turned to the final page. Every head in the room turned. And to Maris Eleanor Whitmore. My name, my full name, which Harold used only on formal occasions and in the workshop when he was about to say something he'd thought about carefully. 1 sealed envelope, to be delivered directly and opened only by the named recipient. He picked up the envelope and slid it across the table. I looked at it for a moment. Harold's handwriting. My name. The ink faded. This had been written years ago, not this March. Whatever was inside had been waiting longer than anyone in this room knew. I broke the seal. A single sheet of paper. In the center, a phone number, then digits. Below it, in Harold's hand, call when you're ready. That was everything. The silence held for exactly 3 seconds. Cecily laughed. It started as a snort, the involuntary kind, before the social calculation arrives, and escalated into something she didn't attempt to control. Must be for a shelter, she said. Somewhere for you to live. My mother turned, away, but her shoulders were shaking. Sterling shook his head with the deliberate patience of a man performing generosity at someone else's expense. Please allow me to finish. Roger Harmon's voice cut through the room, flat and precise. There is one final item in the estate documents. Sterling, I think we've covered everything. Please allow me to finish, Harmon said again. Exactly the same. No different. Emphasis. Twice. The recurring phrase detonated in the room. He opened to the last page, a page I had not seen distributed in the copies that the family had received it. He read a single paragraph, slowly, in the manner of a man who has been instructed to read it in full, regardless of interruption. The sealed envelope delivered to Maris Eleanor Whitmore references a separate legal instrument established under this estate. The terms of that instrument are held by Warren Alcott, Esquire, Columbus, Ohio, who serves as executor of secondary trust. Mr. Alcott has been authorized to release the terms of that instrument upon contact from the named beneficiary only. No member of the family, no co-executor, and no legal representative other than Mr. Alcott holds authority to access or disclose the terms of said instrument. Harmon closed the folder. The room was very quiet. Sterling, what does that mean? Harmon, it means exactly what it says. Sterling. What secondary trust? You have received a complete accounting of Mr. Whitmore's estate as filed for probate. The instrument referenced is not part of the probate estate. I have no further information to provide. He removed his reading glasses, set them on the folder. I looked at his watch. Are there any questions about the provisions as read? Nobody said anything. Because nobody had a question they could make sound reasonable. The paragraph had been specific, formal, and complete. The only person who could access the secondary trust's terms was the person who called the number in the envelope. And the only person who had the number was me. In the parking lot, Diane caught up to me in my car. He knew you couldn't handle it, she said, adjusting her purse strap. That number, it's probably a financial counselor. For people in your situation. Get help. She paused. The secondary trust language is probably just legal. Boilerplate. Harold's attorneys always overcomplicated things. Sterling appeared behind her, hand on the roof of my car. The casual placement of a man who wants to demonstrate that the space around you belongs to him. If that trust has anything to do with Whitmore Properties, that goes through me. I'm the COO. 10 years. He tapped the roof twice. Are we clear? I said nothing. From inside Cecily's Lexus, audible through the closed window, laughter. My phone buzzed. The family group thread I'd been muted on for months. Cecily's message. Update. Maris got an envelope, just a phone number. Grandpa's final joke. 3 laughing emojis. A heart reaction from my mother. I got into the driver's seat, locked the door. The envelope was on the passenger seat. Harold's handwriting. Call when you're ready. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from the specific feeling of watching people who were supposed to love you demonstrate, in a single morning, the full and complete architecture of what they actually thought of you. I picked up my phone. I dialed the number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. A man's voice. Hello. I've been expecting your call. I drove to Harold's house that evening not because I had been invited, but because I had not been uninvited, which, in the Whitmore family, had always been the only kind of access I had. The family called it a memorial dinner. In practice, it was the division of the pride. Remaining furniture, conducted over Harold's 2012 Cabernet. Sterling sat at the head of the table. Harold's chair. He did not hesitate. I'll be taking over operations at the company, he announced, swirling the glass. Dad would have wanted continuity. Nobody challenged him. Cecily was running projections on her phone. Brand had, his laptop is open. My mother lifted her glass, to Harold, and to the family he provided for. They drank. I held my glass and did not sip. Thea, my mother said, turning to me with the specific brightness she used when she was about to draw blood in a room full of witnesses. Do you want to show everyone your envelope? I'm sure we'd all love to see the phone number. She smiled. Maybe we can all call and see who picks up. 3 cousins laughed. Aunt Virginia, my mother's younger sister, the one who had watched me across the table during the round robin, did not laugh. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Sterling, the company is still held in some trust set up years ago. But those things expire when the grantor dies, so it falls into the estate, falls to us. He said this with the confidence of a man who had skimmed the relevant section of a textbook on the way over and absorbed the conclusion without reading the details. He was wrong. Irrevocable trusts do not expire when the grantor dies. That is the entire point of an irrevocable trust. Warren Alcott had explained this to me 45 minutes earlier in a phone call I had made from the parking lot while Cecily's laughter was still audible through her car window. I ate my dinner. I washed my plate. I left before dessert. Sterling patted my shoulder on the way out. Chin up. At least you got something. Some people don't even get an envelope. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and a gas receipt in my pocket. Warren Alcott's Columbus address written on the back in ballpoint pen. Press. Hard enough to read in the dark. My apartment was 700 square feet above a dry cleaner on Main Street, in Holden. The radiator clicked. The fridge hummed. I set the envelope on the kitchen table and sat across from it. Call when you're ready. I thought about Harold's voice. Not the formal will voice, not the attorney reading his actual voice, in the workshop, the night of Thanksgiving. She manages that store. Inventory, staff, accounts. That's called responsibility. I thought about the 4 months after his stroke. The daily drive. The medication. Organizer. The slow walks. I thought about the night I spread my documents on my bed to go to Warren Alcott's office in the morning, driver's license, birth, certificate, the gas receipt, and I thought about how I had done this alone, in an apartment above a dry cleaner, while my family had dinner over Harold's wine, and talked about continuity. I did not sleep. I thought about one specific thing as I lay in the dark. The attorney's pause on page 7. 3 seconds. He looked at me. Not at the document, at me. Then back to the document. I was certain of it. I lay in the dark and thought, he knows something about this that nobody in the room was told. He knows what's in the secondary trust. He cannot say it. He was telling me something when he looked at me. The gas receipt was on the nightstand. Warren Alcott, Columbus. I set my alarm for 6 and lay with my eyes open until 4. Warren Alcott's office was on the 9th floor of a building in Columbus that looked like it had been designed by someone who believed in permanence. He was 63, silver-haired, with the bearing of a man who had been keeping a very long secret with complete professional equanimity and was about to hand it over at exactly the right moment. He met me at the door. Shook my hand the way Harold shook hands, full grip, not rushed. Your grandfather spoke about you often, he said. Please sit down. He opened a folder that was thick, rubber-banded, post-it flagged in 3 colors. A folder that had been accumulating substance for 20 years. Your grandfather established an irrevocable trust in 2005, he said. You are the sole beneficiary. I looked at him. The trust holds the controlling equity interest in Whitmore Properties, 52%. It also holds 4 commercial properties, 2 residential, parcels including the Granville House, and liquid assets. Current total value, approximately $38 million. Outside the window, Columbus, October, the morning light. There was a condition, Warren Alcott said. He set his hands flat on the folder. Your grandfather was very specific about this. The trust was structured so that if you never called the phone number, if you threw the envelope away, ignored it, or failed to call within 90 days of the will, reading the entire trust would transfer permanently to a charitable foundation of his choosing, not to the estate, not to the family, to the foundation. He paused. The condition was that you had to call voluntarily. No one could tell you to. No one could hint at it. If I had contacted you, if anyone had prompted you, the condition would have been violated, and the trust would have transferred regardless of whether you eventually called. I stared through the window. Your grandfather told me when he set this up, I want the person who receives this to call because they trusted me, not because someone told them to. If they trust me enough to call a phone number with no explanation, that's the person who should run what I built. He reached into the folder and produced a thumb drive. He made a recording, for you specifically. Would you like to hear it? I said yes. The recording began with the sound of the workshop. I recognized the ambient quality of it, the faint metal resonance of the corrugated roof. A bird somewhere in the maples. Harold cleared his throat. He always did this before something. He had thought about it carefully. Maris. His voice was from several years ago, full, steady, the workshop voice. If you're hearing this, you called. I knew you would. I'm not going to pretend. I wasn't sure I was sure. I've been watching this family for 20 years, and I've been watching you for 20 years, and I know the difference. When I had the stroke, you drove 40 minutes every morning for 4 months, and nobody asked you to. I know nobody asked you to. I asked Virginia afterward, and she said nobody told you to come. You came because I needed someone to come. Your mother says you can't handle things. I want to tell you something about that. The people in my life who could handle things, every single one of them, people didn't think they could handle things. Because handling things quietly, without making it a performance, looks from the outside like not doing anything. He knew you couldn't handle it. You've heard that your whole life. I want you to hear this once. He knew you could handle everything. I built this to prove it. There's a condition, and Warren has explained it. There's also June Oze, my office manager, who has been waiting for you for 6 months. Carl Dunbar at the construction side, who has been with me for 22 years. The people who actually Whitmore Properties run it because they know the work. You know the work. You sanded table edges in my workshop for 15 years. You know this difference between something that holds and something that looks like it holds. Run it like that. Love, your grandfather. The recording ended. Warren Alcott turned off the speaker, placed his hands flat on the desk. I sat in silence for a moment. Then I said, walk me through the documents. We spent 4 hours on the trust structure. Harold had spent 18 months designing it. Annual capacity evaluations for 15 consecutive years, so the trust could not be contested on grounds of diminished competence. A legal entity, completely separate from the probate estate, which was why Roger Harmon knew nothing about it. The families, the millions, the apartments, the vacation, house was real, valid, and complete. Harold had honored each of them as they were. The operating company, the controlling equity, the real estate separated, years before, held in a structure the probate estate could not touch. I enrolled in the fundamentals of commercial real estate administration through a continuing education program at Ohio State that same week. Not because I needed the credential. Because Harold had spent 20 years teaching me to learn the materials before I put my hands on them, and I intended to honor that. I drove back to Holden in the afternoon. I went to Birch and Stone, opened the store, helped a woman choose a dining table. She wanted something that would last. I told her what to look for: grain direction, joinery, the weight of the piece against its footprint. She bought the oak slab table, 8 feet, the one Harold would have chosen. It's beautiful, she said. It'll hold, I said. That's more important. Sterling filed the objection 2 weeks after the will reading. It was not a legal contest of the probate will. That will was clean, unambiguous, and properly executed. Sterling's objection was to the existence of the secondary trust, which he claimed violated some implied duty of the estate to disclose all assets. His attorney, Warren Alcott, told me on the phone, had filed the claim, using language that suggested Sterling did not fully understand what an irrevocable trust was. It was established in 2005, Warren Alcott said. Harold removed the assets from his personal holdings at that time. They ceased to be estate assets the moment the trust was formed. There is nothing to contest. He knows that, I said. He knows it now, Warren Alcott said. His attorney explained it to him after filing. Sterling's legal fees over the following 3 months were, according to Virginia, who called me on a Sunday because Virginia had always operated on her own schedule and had never much cared what my mother thought about it. Significant. His $800,000 from the public will had, by February, begun its own accounting problem. I did not call Sterling. I did not call Cecily. I did not call my mother. I called June Oze. June had been Harold's office manager for 19 years. She was the kind of person who could tell you where every document in a filing system was without consulting the filing system. Because she had built the filing system and remembered every decision she had made about it. She had known about the trust since 2018. He told me enough to be useful, she said. The first morning I sat across from her in Harold's office. He said, June, whoever walks in here with this document, she touched the trust folder. That's who runs it. Help them learn the building. A pause. I've been waiting for you. Carl Dunbar, the construction foreman, shook my hand at the job site on a Thursday. He had 22 years of Harold's work in his hands, and no political interest in anyone's claim on the company. Your grandfather walked every site, he said. First one there, last to leave. Drove Sterling crazy because Harold always caught things Sterling missed. Like what? Like everything. He said it without satisfaction, just fact. You walk sites too? I'd like to start. He handed me a hard hat. Cecily called in November. Proplink's property management software had a compliance conflict with a county permitting database that Whitmore Properties managed. She did not ask for help directly. She said she was reaching out to reconnect, which is what people say when they need something and are trying to establish goodwill. First, I gave her June Osei's contact information. June's team resolved the issue in 3 weeks. The fix reduced Proplink's maintenance response time by 31%. By spring, the vendor relationship was formalized. The business arrangement was sound. I did not frame it as mercy. I framed it as what it was, a good operational fit. My mother called once in December. Her voice had the particular quality of someone who had rehearsed what she wanted to say and was finding, in delivery, that the words were less adequate than she'd hoped. I want you to know, she said, that I didn't understand what your grandfather had planned. I know, I said. A pause. He knew you could handle it, she said it quietly. The phrase in Harold's register, not hers. It cost her something to say. I could hear the cost. He said it differently than you did, I said. But yes. We were quiet for a moment. I'll call Sunday, I said. She said okay. The last page was in Roger Harmon's file the entire time. I want to be specific about this, because specificity is what the will module requires. Not there was more to the document, but the document had a page, numbered 12. The copies distributed to the family were 11 pages. Page 12 was in the reading room on the day of the will reading, inside Harmon's folder. Read aloud while Sterling tried to stop the reading, and Harmon said, twice, with no different emphasis, please allow me to finish. I went back to Harmon's office 6 weeks after the will reading, not with a demand, but with a question. Could I see the complete estate file? As a beneficiary of the estate, I had standing to request documents. Harmon's, a paralegal, produced the file. I reviewed it at the conference table, the same room, the same fluorescent light, the empty chairs. Page 12. The paragraph about Warren Alcott and the secondary trust instrument. It had been read at the will reading. I'd heard it. The family had heard it. But the copies the family took home did not include it. Not because it was hidden. Because it was page 12 and the distributed copies were 11 pages. Was that an error? I asked Harmon. He looked at me over his reading glasses. The distributed copies contained the provisions relevant to the named beneficiaries in the public will, he said. Page 12 pertains to a matter outside the probate estate. I was not instructed to distribute it. Were you instructed not to? A pause. I was instructed to read it aloud. I did. And your pause on page 7, I said. You looked at me. He was quiet for a moment. The expression of a man deciding something. Your grandfather came to see me 6 months before he passed, he said. He was very clear about the reading. He said, read every page. Don't let them rush you. He also said. Harmon paused again. My granddaughter will be in the room. She'll be watching. Make sure she sees that you read it all. I sat with that. He knew what the room would do, I said. He knew exactly what the room would do. Harmon removed his glasses. He arranged the reading so that the information in page 12 would be heard by everyone present, on the record, in a room with witnesses, before the family had time to react strategically. He paused. Your grandfather was a very careful man. I thought about Harold's workshop, the way he pressed my thumb into a fence post to teach me the difference between wood that had gone soft and wood that held. If it gives, it's done. The truth wasn't hidden. It was on page 12, in the room. Read aloud. The family had 11 pages in their folders and had assumed the document was complete. They had assumed it. Nobody had checked. I asked Warren Alcott about the recording, whether Harold had said anything about the will reading itself. He produced a transcript. Harold had made 2 recordings. One for me, which I had heard, and one for Warren Alcott's file, which was operational instructions for administering the trust. At the end of the operational recording, Harold had said, "Roger will read the last page. Sterling will try to stop him. Roger won't stop. I've told him, finish every page, no matter what happens in the room. If Maris calls the number, it means she trusted me more than she trusted the room. That's the test, not the money, not the company. Whether she trusted a piece of paper I wrote her name on more than she trusted the people who were laughing. She'll call. I know she'll call. I've been watching her for 20 years. I read that transcript on a Tuesday morning in Warren Alcott's office with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. I read it twice. Then I called June Osei and told her I needed the Q4 operational report because there was work to do. I asked my mother and Sterling to meet me at the coffee shop on Birch Street. I chose the coffee shop deliberately. Not Harold's house, which was mine now. I did not want this conversation in my space. Not their spaces. Neutral ground. Public. The kind of place where nobody performs anything for an audience, because the audience is strangers ordering their morning coffee and has no investment in how anyone presents themselves. I brought 3 documents. The will was filed with the probate court. 12 pages. The copy distributed to Sterling, 11 pages. The paragraph from page 12, printed and certified. I arrived first. Ordered coffee. Laid the 3 documents on the table in a row, side by side, left to right, and waited. They arrived together. Sterling, in what I recognized as Harold's flannel he had, taken it from the house without acknowledging it, the same way he had taken Harold's chair at the dinner table. My mother with her purse held tight, the posture of someone who is nervous and trying to look like she isn't. They ordered. I waited until the cups were on the table. I want to show you something, I said. I pointed to the first document, the will as filed. 12 pages. I pointed to the second, the copy you received. 11 pages. I pointed to the third, page 12. The paragraph Roger Harmon read aloud at the reading while you were suggesting the reading was complete. Sterling looked at the documents. His jaw worked. We heard that paragraph, he said. Yes, I said. You did. It didn't, he stopped. Nobody told us what it meant. It says exactly what it means, I said. The secondary trust instrument was held by Warren Alcott and accessible only to the named beneficiary upon voluntary contact. The terms were public record in the sense that they were read aloud in a room with 7 witnesses. I kept my voice level. Even the voice Harold used in the workshop when he was telling you something once and expected you to hear it. The information was available. You heard it. You chose to assume the reading was complete before the attorney had finished reading. Silence. My mother looked at the documents. Something moved across her face. He knew you couldn't handle it, she said, very quietly. Not as a weapon, as a confession. She was quoting herself back to herself, hearing it. He knew you could handle everything, I said. That's what his recording said. He used those exact words. He was answering what you'd always told me. She closed her mouth. Sterling stared at the table. The flannel, Harold's flannel, was the same one. Harold had worn it in the workshop for 30 years. Sterling had worn it for 3 months without understanding it. The document said what it said. I told them both. I'm not asking you to agree with it. I'm not asking for an acknowledgement. I'm telling you what the record shows because you deserve to know the complete record. I stood. The company is going to be run well. If either of you has skills that fit what we need, June Osei handles hiring. The process is the same for everyone. I left enough cash for all 3 coffees. I walked out into the October morning. A loon called somewhere on the street. No, not a loon. A truck on Route 9. But in that moment, for 1 second, I thought of Cedar Lake and the envelope on the table and Harold's handwriting and 4 words. Call when you're ready. I had been ready. He had known. I wrote 3 things on a card and put it in the desk drawer. Not Harold's desk. My desk, the one I brought from my apartment, the birch and stone model I had been meaning to replace for 2 years and never had, the one with the grain that ran slightly diagonal and made the surface feel warmer than the wood alone would account for. Harold had noticed it the one time he visited my apartment. He ran his finger along the surface and said, "That's red oak." I kept it. The 3 things. First, I don't explain my worth to people who have already decided I have none. The door to Whitmore Properties is open. The hiring process is fair. But I am done demonstrating that I deserve to be trusted by people who have already written the verdict. Second, I don't allow the missing degree 1 semester at Ohio State, left, because Harold needed someone to drive him to physical therapy, and I was the someone in the room to be used as a border around my future. I chose to show up. The choice cost me a semester. It gave me everything else. That accounting is mine. Third, I don't cut off my family. But access and love are not the same thing. They are different categories, and I am no longer going to manage them as if they were the same. Harold had given me these rules without naming them. They were in the workshop, every Sunday, in the way he turned a piece of wood to show me the grain, in the way he waited for me to sand the table edge to the right smoothness instead of telling me when it was ready, in the way he sat on his stool in the dark after Thanksgiving and said, "I've taken care of things." He had taken care of things. I was the thing he had taken care of. The trust document was in the desk drawer. Warren Alcott's card was next to it. The gas receipt, the one with his Columbus address written in ballpoint pen. In the parking lot of Harmon and Pace, pressed hard in the specific urgency of a person who has just been laughed at and is still paying attention, was folded and stored with the trust document. One document said $38 million. The other was a gas receipt. Harold had structured the inheritance so that both of them were necessary. The trust was real. The gas receipt was real. The phone call from a parking lot, while Cecily was laughing, was real. The truth was always there. The document said so. I just had to be willing to read it. Virginia came on a Sunday in November. She brought no reason. She arrived with her coat and her car, and the particular directness of someone who has decided something and doesn't require a context in which to announce it. "I know what he planned," she said at my kitchen table. "He told me. 3 years ago at Christmas, he said, 'Virginia, I'm going to do something and I need to know I can count on you not to mention it.' I said, 'What do you need?' He said, 'Nothing. Just don't be surprised.' You weren't surprised. I was not surprised." She drank her coffee. I was glad. We sat in my apartment, the 700 square feet above the dry cleaner. And I thought about how this was going to change. I had already started looking at properties closer to the Granville house. Not the house I wasn't ready to live there, but closer. "He talked about you in the workshop," Virginia said. "Every Sunday you come. He'd mentioned something you'd figured out, something you'd noticed. He said it, the way he talked about the work specific, not sentimental. I thought about Harold running his thumb along the walnut, the way he taught things by doing them alongside you, not by explaining them. The family's going to come around," Virginia said. "Not completely, but some. Your mother is thinking." "I know. Sterling is Sterling, is Sterling." She set down her cup. "But he's not stupid. He's going to come to June eventually with a resume." "I know. And you'll put him through the process. And I'll put him through the process." Virginia smiled. Not warmly. Virginia's smiles were precise, like punctuation. This one meant correct. We didn't talk about the money. We talked about Carl Dunbar and what Harold had thought about the Northeast development. We talked about the affordable housing project Harold had proposed, and Sterling had killed on thin margin grounds. I told her I was looking at reviving it. She said, "Harold would have liked that." I said, "I know." The radiator clicked. The fridge hummed. The apartment above a dry cleaner on Main Street in Holden, where I had lived for 3 years before anyone expected anything of me, held its particular warmth. In the drawer, the trust document, the gas receipt, the envelope with Harold's handwriting, "Call when you're ready." I was ready. I made one phone call while the room was laughing. That was all it had taken. The gas receipt is framed. Not the envelope. The envelope is in the drawer with the trust documents, Warren Alcott's business card, and the card with the 3 rules I wrote for myself in September. The drawer is where the important documents go. The envelope is important. It stays in the drawer. The gas receipt is on the wall of my office. Not Harold's office. My office, the one I moved into when I moved the operation to the Northeast Development site, the one with windows that face the Holden skyline and a desk I chose myself. The gas receipt is framed in a small frame, plain wood, the kind Harold would have approved of. It is 4 inches by 7 inches. It is barely visible from the door. Inside the frame, a gas receipt from a marathon station on Route 16, dated October, the Tuesday of the will reading. On the back, in ballpoint pen, pressed hard, Warren Alcott's Columbus address. 9 words. 1 address. Written in the parking lot of Harmon and Pace, while my family was still in the building, while Cecily's laughter was audible through the car window, while my mother was adjusting her purse strap and telling me Harold had known couldn't handle it. I wrote the address on the back of a gas receipt because it was what I had in my pocket. I did not have a notebook. I did not have a planner. I had a gas receipt and a pen, and the practical understanding that I needed to write the address before I forgot it, and that the address mattered. I pressed hard so it would be legible. That's the whole story of why it's framed. People who come to the office notice it, or they don't. Carl Dunbar noticed it on the first day. He said, "What's that?" I told him. He nodded. He went back to work. That was the correct response. The document, the trust, the will, the last page was always complete. Harold had built it carefully over 20 years and had it read in a room with witnesses and had instructed the attorney to finish reading regardless of what the room did. The truth wasn't hidden. It was on page 12. It was in the room. It was read aloud. The family had 11 pages and assumed the document was complete. They had assumed it and had not checked. The only person in the room who had noticed the envelope was older than the will. The ink faded, written years before that March was me. The only person who had asked, after the reading, review the complete estate file was me. The only person who called the number was me. Not because I was smarter, not because I was better. Because Harold had taught me, for 15 years of Sundays in a workshop, to press my thumb into the wood and check whether it gave before I committed the weight to it. I pressed. It held. The company is called Whitmore Properties, and Harold's name is still on the properties. Sign outside block letters on a green field. The design Harold made himself in 1987 and never changed. I am not going to change it. Not because I am sentimental, though I am, but because the name is accurate. This is what Harold built. I am running it. Those are two true things, and they can both be true at the same time. The gas receipt is on the wall. The trust document is in the drawer. The last page of the will was always page 12. The truth wasn't hidden. It was written down. Nobody read it. I did. On the first morning of November, I was at the Granville house before anyone else arrived. Carl was bringing a crew at 9 for the Northeast Development site walk, and I had stopped at the house first. I went to the workshop. Pull chain light. Single bulb. The warm yellow that means work is happening here. Harold's workbench, 8 feet of maple, worn smooth in the exact spots where his hands rested for 40 years. I put my hand flat on the surface. The worn spot is where he used to rest. My hand fits it. I didn't do anything. I stood in the workshop with my hand on the bench, and the pull chain light on, and the smell of sawdust and linseed oil, in a room that has not changed in 20 years. Then I heard Carl's truck on the gravel. I pulled the chain. The light went off. I slid the door shut and walked across the gravel to where Carl was climbing out of his truck with a rolled site plan under his arm. "Ready?" he said. "Yes," I said. "Let's build." If you've ever sat in a room while someone read a document and known, just known, that something was wrong, that a page was missing, or a number didn't add up, or an attorney paused for exactly 3 seconds at the line that would have changed everything, type last page in the comments. Tell me what you noticed. Tell me what you didn't say. Because here is what 20 years of watching and 1 parking lot phone call have taught me. The truth is almost never hidden. It is written down. It is filed. It is in the room. It is on page 12. It is in the envelope that was sitting on the table before the reading began. Older than all the other documents, waiting. The people who benefit from you not reading it are counting on something very specific, that you will assume the document is complete before you reach the end, that you will trust the room over the record, that you will believe what the people around you believe, and not ask to see the full file. My grandfather structured an inheritance that required one thing from me: trust the paper more than the room. Call the number, not because someone told me to, because he left it, and I trusted him. If someone left you something everyone said was worthless, a number, an envelope, a name on a folded receipt, and you called it or followed it or read it to the end, type call in the comments. I want to know who else finished reading.